Hi, everyone. It's S.J. Thomason, and today we're going to talk about what is truth. And so that's a really big question, and it's something that I think we all can fairly say we desire. You, of course, wouldn't be advocating telling lies. Nobody wants to do that. Everyone wants to tell the truth. That's something that I think is innate within us, and it's part of our conscience. And so to that end, let's talk about why we think the Bible is the truth. We'll mention a little bit about that today. This is an open forum, so I'm going to open it up for other people to come in here. It doesn't matter what the background is. If you're an atheist, you're welcome. If you're a Christian, you're welcome. If you're Hindu, Buddhist, whatever, you're all welcome. Okay, so what we're going to talk about is the truth. And so the big question is, number one, we know that people have this desire to tell the truth. Number two, the question is, were the apostles telling the truth and the Bible authors? So do we have truth in the Bible? Well, we can look for evidence of lies. And one thing that we could do if we wanted to find evidence of lies in the Bible is if we found that it seemed like there are some strong tall tales being told. Now, we do see that in the Gnostics, but rather than telling tall tales and stretching the truth in the Gospels and the New Testament, we see a lot of honesty. We see a lot of people like the disciples not looking so great. You know, it didn't look really great when Peter denied Jesus 3 times. That should have been covered up if they were trying to fake this thing. It didn't look great when Jesus referred to himself. He said, "You think I'm a drunk." He was talking about drinking. They could have covered that up, but they didn't. They could have covered up the fact that Jesus' family tried to stop his ministry. They thought he was a little crazy. They could have covered that up, but they didn't. His brothers denied him. All this kind of stuff happened. And all the stuff was really important to the apostles was, let's just tell the truth. And so I see some really cool people in the chat already. So I see Digital Gnosis and Robert Ingersoll. I think that's the same Bob Ingersoll who's on Twitter, if I'm not mistaken. If you can, I don't know if I've seen him on my channel before. Vera Cruz, that's Digital Gnosis's girlfriend, lovely lady. And so here, I'm going to go ahead and put the chat. Sounds different than usual. Oh, shoot. I don't have my thing plugged in. Thank you for, what a good ear you have. Okay, let me fix that. Okay, should be sounding better now. So thank you for verifying that. I see that I didn't have my speaker plugged in. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put the link in here into the chat. So if somebody wants to come join me and have a chat about this. Now, the reason I have this chat called What is Truth is because it was a question that Pontius Pilate asked Jesus. And so I'm starting a series on what is truth. And it's something that we're going to run these free-for-alls. And I might try to do it once a week, every Wednesday at 2 o'clock. It seems like a pretty good time. I can reach out to the people from England at that time, I noticed. So that's a pretty good deal. So the question is, what is truth? Now, that's what happened again when Pontius Pilate had come into a conversation with Jesus. And he was asking Jesus about who he was. And he said, "Hey, I've got the power to set you free." And Jesus basically didn't, he didn't take him up on that because he knew what his fate was. He knew what was going to happen. So right now I see that we've got a few people already here. So I'm going to go ahead and add these guys to the stream. So welcome. I've got Nathan Ormond, a friend of the channel, ex-Christian Aaron. She's definitely a friend. I don't think she's been on. Oh, yeah, you've been on my channel before, right? You've been in
once before, yeah. Just during a group chat.
Okay, yeah. So group chat today, and so welcome. So you guys want to go ahead and introduce yourselves because I know we have people in the chat here I haven't seen before, like Shiloh. So I don't think everyone might not know you. And Praise Jesus. I think I've seen Praise here before.
Yeah, I'm Nathan, Digital Gnosis in the chat. I've got a channel called Digital Gnosis. And me and Aaron have been waiting 3 days for this, SJ.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I know I was supposed to do it on Monday. I'm sorry. I got this work thing came in and I had to work on something for work. So I kind of have to prioritize that over making YouTube videos or I might get in a little trouble.
Understandable. I'm Aaron. I go by ex-Christian Aaron or ex-Teen Aaron, mostly on Twitter, moving over to YouTube more and more these days, mostly on other people's channels, but eventually maybe I'll start my own.
Yeah, you should. You should, definitely.
Yeah, maybe the new year.
Yeah. Well, we're hoping the new year, new everything, right? We want to throw away the pandemic. This 2020 has been such a disaster. I mean, I don't know what you guys think, but it's been pretty awful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's an argument there. So we have an agreement on something. We might not agree on theology, but we definitely agree that 2020 has been not so fun. I've been trying to teach class. I'm done teaching right now. I'm on break, but trying to teach classes and engage students by Zoom is just, I mean, it's an understatement to say that's less than ideal. It's awful.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's that. And so I wanted to ask you guys. So we have our topic today is what is truth, and so I don't know if we can talk to that end, or we could also talk on. I actually wasn't first going to ask you something. I think I saw something with both of you. Now I mentioned before to Aaron, I've seen you on people like Seth Andrews' channel, and Seth is like kind of a well-known atheist. And I've seen Nathan, of course, interacting a lot and saying that Pine Creek Doug is his favorite. I saw you say that's one of your favorite channels.
One of my favorite channels, yeah.
And I didn't see my channel name.
Oh, SJ, I'm sorry.
I'm a fan of Doug as well.
You're a fan of Doug as well. So Nathan, you guys, what are your top 3 YouTube channels? Oh, good, Craig's here.
So number 1 is SJ Thomason.
Good answer.
I really enjoyed. There's a channel called Philosophy Overdose that uploads a lot of like talks and lectures and things on philosophy. I enjoy that. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but I really like it. Another one is there's a guy called Kane B, and I just find he again talks about philosophy, but I find the way he like describes things really funny as well. So I love watching him. And then I put my third option as Pine Creek, just because whenever I'm starting to think Christianity might be true again, I can go and watch a Pine Creek video, and it'll get my confidence up in it.
Yeah, he was just running one. I caught like 2 minutes of it, and I got mad and put a comment in and left. He's like, everybody knows that Christianity is not true, and everybody knows. And he's saying all this stuff, and I'm listening to him like, what do you mean everybody knows? There's 2 billion worshipers in the world. He's telling me everybody knows. So what planet is he on? I mean, I don't know. Anyway, but anyway. I want to introduce Craig. Craig's here. Craig.
Hi, Craig.
Well, you're on mute right now, Craig.
I'm not sure if my phone is going to be working. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sure can.
Classic Craig, right?
You guys are robotic. Did you mention this yet? She was on Digital Gnosis. Aaron was interviewed by Nathan yesterday or 2 days ago.
Oh, you were? I missed that.
Yeah, it was kind
fun.
of last minute,
I
but it
watched
was
most of
fun.
it.
It was instead of this a couple of days ago.
Because I set aside time. I mean, I was all set up to go, and I hadn't checked Twitter at all since I got up in the morning for some reason, and I came down here at like 10 to 11, and I saw that you rescheduled, so I was like, who else is going live today? It was fun though, Nathan. I enjoyed it.
That's cool. Did you have anybody else on besides just you two, or?
No, just talking to Erin about her kind of background and stuff for people.
Some really good questions I found. That was like one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's good.
Interviews. Nathan has good questions.
So what was one of your questions that was really good? Or what was?
Oh, I can't remember. I guess like, so one of them, I mean, interestingly, because Craig's here, was like, I don't want to if we want to talk about like truth and stuff, I don't want to degenerate too far, but because Craig obviously talks a lot about how the reason he's a Christian is because of religious experiences, right? But then for Erin, she's someone who what led her away is actually that she could replicate these experiences through like doing things like lucid dreaming or meditating or whatever. And so she was like, well, I can't really say that there's like a God behind this, because I can cause these things to happen through like natural causes. So it could just be that. And it was like, well, what do you think is the difference between, why are you coming to this conclusion, whereas someone like Craig's coming to that different conclusion?
That was a good, that was what I was referring to too. That was part of my favorite part of that discussion, I think.
Yeah, I want to get into that because that's actually something that relates to a lot of things I've been thinking about lately. But before we do that, I want to say thank you to John, who just sent a very generous super chat. And he says, thank you, Dr. SJ. Please keep up the stellar work. And that's really nice of John. Now, it's given that Dr. Jill Biden is not supposed to be called Dr. Jill Biden. I don't know. I have to say something. When I never, you don't see me refer to myself as Dr. SJ or anything like that. And the reason you don't see that is because, not because I don't have a relevant I mean, my PhD is in a field that's not relevant to Christianity per se, but it's in business. But the reason I don't refer to myself that way is because my dad, growing up, my grandfather had a doctorate in education, and my dad would be like, "Why is he calling himself a doctor all the time on all his mail and everything?" And he's like, "Why does he do that? He's not a medical doctor. You're not allowed to call yourself a doctor." So I've had that in my mind my whole life. So I'm like, you can call me professor, but don't call me doctor. It sounds a little bit. In school they do that, but that's about it. So.
Well, I saw a really funny one where someone's daughter was like, said, "Oh, you're a doctor of philosophy. Is philosophy a disease or something?"
Yeah, that's true. That's the kind of doctorate I have, Dr. Philosophy. So that's funny. So we just lost Craig, unfortunately. So his phone. Here's what I'm really hoping, that Craig gets a computer for Christmas.
Yeah, I know. Well, he streams out because of his wife, right, as well. So he needs to get a study or something, like soundproofed off, and
yeah, or he can just go in his prayer closet.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's quiet in there and peaceful, and if he has a computer, he can hook it up, and
That's what we're doing right now. That's why I'm in this different room than I have been in the past, because we're setting up a little area where I can always just be set up and also separated from like the kids, because I've got two young kids. So
yeah, that's good.
It's a lot easier so far to just come down here and pop on whenever.
That is good. I don't have that. I'm in this room where I always am, except for this is also we have 2 guest rooms, and this is one of the guest rooms. This is our upstairs one, so it's nice and quiet. But it also means that when next week we've got a whole bunch of people. Don't tell the COVID police, but we have a whole bunch of people coming to stay with us. 2 different sets of families in 2 different time periods, so I will not be able to stream sometime between next Tuesday when the first family arrives, through New Year's. So they're going to be occupying this room. So unless I want to stream out of my closet, which I might do that.
Maybe we should make it a thing. Yeah, a closet
stream Christmas dinner.
Yeah.
Yes, like this crazy family. So that's funny. So yeah, I wanted to ask you about this lucid dreaming, because I know we talked a little bit about that before, but since then I've been I was trying to figure out, I spent a bunch of years, I think I mentioned this before, but I spent a bunch of years after I kind of fell away from the Catholic Church, where I was wandering around, and I've still been trying to piece together exactly what I was doing all these years, and what I was calling myself, because it's just my memory that I'm trying to remember a lot of this. And I have in my bookshelf, I was busy reading books by Deepak Chopra and James Redfield and what's his name? Wayne Dyer, and a bunch of other people who were kind of on that end. The Dalai Lama. I had all these books like that. And so I was studying that stuff. And I remember like Wayne Dyer saying, we can find our sacred self if we just tap into our soul and we tap into all this kind of stuff. And then we can get this higher energy and connect up with this greater energy that's sort of flowing around the whole universe. And it's a very pantheistic sort of idea that I bought into. And I didn't even know what that was. I didn't know what I was following. I never really had a title for it until I started listening to Alicia. What's her last?
Childers.
Yeah. I started listening to her and realizing, okay, it's sort of like progressive Christianity, but it's sort of like this, some of this Christ consciousness idea, or maybe New Age. I mean, all those terms are defined so differently by different people. So I don't know exactly what I was following, but I did know that I felt like, this special dreams and that sort of thing. So I'm just bringing that up because I wanted to see if you wanted to expand on, both of you, if you want to expand on your thoughts on those things, or whether you think that atheism itself and naturalism is more fulfilling in answering questions in life. Because I think that actually takes atheism. I think that takes it to another, not atheism. It's never atheism to believe that, but I think it takes your beliefs to another set of answers if you take it to that New Age level, actually.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I can probably speak to like psychedelic use, and like I'm interested in that for various reasons. But it might be better for Erin to talk to like her meditation and lucid dreaming and stuff, because I don't really know anything about all of that, really.
Okay, so where do I start? I've always, even as a kid, I did struggle a lot with things looking back now, I can tell it was like a sleep paralysis thing. So I've always had trouble going to bed. I always had trouble going to sleep. My mind goes a million miles per hour. So I've always, how should I word this? Okay, so maybe a few years back when I was doing counseling and I was doing cognitive behavioral therapy, we were doing mindfulness techniques, and I was in this group where we were learning cognitive behavioral therapy, and they did like kind of a body scan mindfulness technique, and I remember in that session, it was just like a quick 10-minute meditation, but I had experienced kind of like this wave of peace kind of come on, like a wave of relaxation. And I remember feeling almost like a little bit disassociated, but in a kind of a good way, I guess. It was like I finally had disconnected from all the stress and all the rumination that I was having at the time. So that piqued my interest in doing some more meditations and learning some more techniques for how to, detach myself from my kind of anxious thought patterns. I wasn't reading anything by any like spiritual leaders like Deepak Chopra or any of those ones. I was actually just kind of looking into the psychology of it and how to, that's what cognitive behavioral therapy is. It's all about like catching your self-talk and challenging those beliefs, and then incorporating times of mindfulness and to kind of get yourself out of that cyclical thinking that I was really bad at. But somewhere in that year that I was learning that, I also just started listening to a lot of different guided meditations because I found that they were more helpful for me with meditating rather than just sitting by myself. Because like I said, I had like this problem with rumination and having my thoughts and it was really hard for me to just sit and observe my thoughts, and what they suggested. So I started doing a lot of guided meditations, and through the guided meditations, I would experience different, these were like, I would sit down for like an hour and a half at a time. So like we're talking, you're getting really close to the cusp of sleeping at that point, especially I usually do meditations while lying down. So it was in that time that I started having experiences that some people would probably describe them as like astral projecting or lucid dreaming. I also started using a bit of a technique to, when I was going to sleep at nighttime, lucid dream, because I had lucid dreams before, but I had never tried to like kind of capture it purposefully. So I started using some of the same techniques when I was falling asleep, and I started having lucid dreams, and I started feeling like I had a little bit more control over my dreams. And for me, it was just a fun experience. But I don't think at any point I thought there was anything like spooky going on. I think I was just learning how to like control my thought patterns a little bit more. I think I was learning how to like embrace that period between being awake and being asleep, and using it for beneficial reasons. For me, it was kind of to ease different anxieties and to kind of learn how to step outside the everyday kind of stresses that I was experiencing.
So because I think I do the same thing with lucid dreaming, but I don't do it. It's not like it's intentional. It's actually just how I am when I dream. I'm the same way. I have a really hard time going to sleep. My thoughts are running around. I have to take melatonin.
Same as me. So I'd had lucid dreams before, and I'd never even thought about possibly even trying to be more intentional with them. And so for me, it was just simply reading about what lucid dreaming was and how some people have gone into their sleep patterns with a bit more intention and trying to like maybe be a little bit more aware. So I got to the point where I was lucid dreaming and I was actually somewhat able to control my dreams. And for me, I see that all as psychological quirks, and I find them fun. And for me, they benefit me because they get me out of the everyday kind of stressful thinking that I say I used to. I still do somewhat. I feel like I'm a lot better now than I used to be.
I want to comment on that really quickly, because it's so funny that I have the exact same thing, and I can easily manipulate my dreams. I've figured out ways in the middle of the dream, like to sort of change the outcome. Like I see myself going one place, and I'm like, okay, right now you're going to fly. And I like just burst out and start flying, and I'm like flying above all. And it's like fun. Like I actually think that's a really good time. But but the other thing is, that's kind of funny that you guys are going to get a kick out of is today I woke up I don't even know if I want to admit this, but it's so funny. I woke up at 4:00 in the morning, And we lost Craig again. I woke up at 4:00 in the morning, and so I don't know, I shouldn't do this, but I pick up my phone and I look at my Twitter account, and I see that Braxton Hunter and Nathan had this interaction, and Nathan's like, "What the?" Braxton said, "Atheists should not go watch this video." So I see the video at 6 minutes, and I'm like, "Okay, I got 6 minutes. I'll listen to the video." So I listen to his video, and I go to sleep, and I have a dream that I'm hanging out with Godless Engineer and his wife. Because Braxton said
that's how the mind works.
so funny. And Braxton said that Godless Engineer, if we pray for him, he's the next one to become a Christian. Like he actually put Godless at the end of the video, and Godless Engineer's like, no, So in my dream, we're all hanging out. It was like anti-COVID. We didn't have to worry about COVID anymore. We weren't wearing masks, and we're just hanging out. And I'm like, so let me tell you guys, what do you think about it? I wake up and I thought it seemed like it was so real that I get up and I look at my Twitter again, and I see that Godless, I look at his tweets and stuff, and I'm like, his wife's tweets, and I'm looking at this stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how weird that I'm having dreams. I mean, who has dreams about people who are on Twitter?
I dream about everybody.
Do you really?
Yeah. I interact with a lot of people in my dreams. I remember a lot of my dreams too in the morning.
Yeah, I tend to too, especially the weirder ones. Like if it's super weird, I'm definitely remembering it. So
it's interesting though. Like I haven't been as intentional about like trying to do the lucid dreaming thing as much lately. So I mean, it's interesting to me that when I was kind of practicing it more and trying to do it more, I did do it more, and then I kind of stopped caring so much. And I haven't done it as much lately. Occasionally it happens, but it's just like where my mind is focused on, that's kind of where it went. And that's just, to me, that's just like more evidence of like just like these psychological quirks and tricks that we can do with our brain.
Yeah. I know it's so true. You can kind of manipulate things in a way. And I think the nice thing about dreams is it's a way to sort out your life. A lot of times you might have questions that are bugging you, and it might even be not consciously bugging you. Like you might have unconscious things going on, and then you have a dream, you wake up and you're like, oh, that's the answer. That's what I should do. So Nathan dreamt that Vera fell off a cliff on her head and died. Nathan, that's a horrible dream.
Well, I've not had a dream. I've not remembered a dream in like years, but the only one that I can remember in like the past 2 years was because V can't drive yet. So I remembered like I was giving her driving lessons, and she like wouldn't listen to what I was telling her to do, and she was like driving dangerously. And then she got so annoyed at me that she parked the car, got out, and then walked off the edge of a cliff and landed on her head.
Oh wow. That is a terrible dream.
So you're worried? Are you worried about her driving?
Maybe.
We can get all Jungian with this if we wanted to, but
poor Joshua Howard says he's been having a recurring dream that his pet leopard gecko dies. He's had her 18 years. Oh, see, I'm going to be so sad when my dog goes. I can't even think about it.
I had recurring dreams my whole childhood. Like I had a couple dreams that stuck with me for at least 20 years. And they kind of went away eventually, but
my most amazing dreams. One of my most amazing, I got a few of them, but one of my most amazing dreams that happened when I was in college was I went to freshman year. I went to USF and I didn't really like it, for University of South Florida. So then I went to FAU, Florida Atlantic, for a semester while I was figuring out what to do for my sophomore year. And then I transferred to Florida State. But just before I transferred, like in November, I think it was around November, I was in my accounting class, and there was a girl who sat about 3 rows ahead of me, or 2 or 3 rows ahead. And I always noticed her. Something about her kind of stuck out. And so one night I had this dream that she was going to be my college roommate at Florida State, which would be kind of weird that she happened to transfer the exact same kind of weird off semester. And so then the next day I go to class, and she walks up to me out of the blue, and she started kind of striking up a conversation. And I said, oh yeah, well, I'm transferring and I told my sister about the dream. That's the key. I told my sister about the dream. So it wasn't like I just made this up after the fact. And so I went to, I was walking with her out of class, and she struck up the conversation, and I said, I'm transferring to Florida State. And she's like, so am I. And we ended up being roommates. And she was like the major person who really kept me grounded. Like she's this Catholic. She always kept me going to church, and she did all this stuff that if it weren't for her, I would have been probably more of a wild child. So I'm really glad I had her good influence. So it was kind of a good thing. So sometimes you get a good dream or a good feeling and it works out well. Craig is back. Craig.
Hopefully.
Oh yeah, you're back. So Craig, are you going to be able to get a computer for this Christmas, you think?
Aaron was saying, and then she roboted out of. I think it might be a connection thing in the area.
I think it's your connection, Craig, more than I think, because we're all sort of okay. I think it's because you're on your phone and everything.
I'm like hardwired in here. Everything's good. I think I haven't had any issues yet since I've been set up down here.
Are you connected? You're actually not even using a Wi-Fi. You're connected by.
Oh, actually, never mind. Never mind. I just lied. I'm on a different computer. My new setup will be all hardwired in.
That's good. That's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, the hardwire connection is in the master bedroom closet in my house. So if I want to do a setup in the closet.
Mine's under the stairs, like in that cubby that goes underneath the stairs. I actually thought about setting up in there for like a little while, but then I was
You
like,
and
no,
Harry
it's a little
Potter.
tight. Yeah,
Did you get the idea from Harry Potter?
Yeah.
That's so funny. So Craig, what's up? Have you heard any of the conversation yet? We've been talking about dreams and manipulating dreams and doing stuff like that. We still haven't talked about what is truth yet. We got to get to that.
I can only make out like every third word, but the thing that she was talking about is kind of what I was trying to get at with spiritual experiences. Like she said there was a way of like cultivating it and increasing it so that it was more vivid.
Yes,
right?
I achieved sainthood in my dreams.
Sainthood. Wow. Now I've never achieved sainthood in my dream.
I'm totally joking, but I mean, there's definitely a process of like work on it, and you kind of achieve these other levels of I don't know, states of your brain.
I keep meaning to put a pen and a piece of paper next to my bed so that when I get up, I write it down so I remember it longer. Because a lot of times you remember it right away and then you kind of forget it as the day goes by.
That's actually a technique for improving your like lucid dreaming and your dream callback kind of is starting to write it down. I did that for a long time. I don't do it as much anymore, but I can remember I remember most of my dreams, at least for the morning. Is there a recurring theme in your dreams? Like, do you find that there's? It depends. What was I dreaming about last night? I often have dreams just related to what's going on and what conversations I'm having and who I've interacted with. I have kids, so a lot of my dreams involve my kids in some sort of situation. I do have a lot of I would say I still, not as much as I used to, but I do have a lot of like apocalyptic type dreams. I know you probably find that interesting. So I occasionally do wake up kind of like stressed out because I'm replaying something for me, it was like some of the movies and things that I grew up on. I occasionally those ones still come back for me, and it's super annoying. But,
yeah, it's like you're trying to. I still have dreams with people, my good friends from Boca Raton, which is where I lived for 21 years. So I still have a lot of dreams hanging out with those friends as if we're all back like we were 20 years ago. And so it's kind of crazy.
But most of my dreams also incorporate like any movies that I've watched lately or anything like that. Like
that's why I don't watch horror films. I refuse to watch horror films.
I like horror films. I don't actually dream. I don't have like horror or terror nightmares.
That's good.
That are ever related to like the horror movies I watch. But I watch a lot of like history stuff I have for the last couple of years, and I often will have dreams that I'm back in some sort of other empire from thousands of years ago.
That's pretty wild. I used to have dreams when I was in college, and I wanted to graduate really badly. I was just ready to get done with it. I was so burned out after the 4 years initial, and so I remember I'd have all these dreams that I was flying, and I looked it up, and it's like you're just trying to get away. And then I would have dreams that I've had a lot of dreams where suddenly like this, because at one point we lived on the intercoastal down in South Florida, and I would dream that the water would suddenly come up like a tidal wave and crash over our house. And actually, I still have these dreams where I'm buying a house on the water and suddenly the water starts rising like crazy. Mm-hmm. And it's just, and I think it's because I feel like I'm overcome with something, like I'm overdoing it in some way, or maybe feel overwhelmed in some way. And so I'm feeling like I'm drowning, like that kind of thing. So But I never do drown. It's just like I see the water rising, and then suddenly I change my dream around. I'm like, okay, change it. You're new spot. This is bad right now. Readjust, and suddenly I'll be in a different place in my dream, not in front of that house with the water rising. And so it's kind of weird.
Do you ever dream about like Jesus?
Yeah, I've had 2 dreams. I had one where he gave me a challenge that I'm still working on, and that was a few years ago.
During like a nighttime sleep.
Yeah, it was regular. Like I wasn't playing around with that dream, and in fact, I woke up and I was like, whoa, it actually kind of. Because we were all, I don't want to really get into that one so much, but
okay.
I haven't been able to.
But
I'm still working on making my life, tweaking it the way he envisions it for me, and so I'm still working on that. And so until I succeed and feel like I've succeeded in his eyes, which maybe will never happen, but until I get to the point where I think that he's challenging me to go, I don't want to let the cat too much out of that bag.
Okay.
So it's still working. It's tough. But then here's a crazy dream I had though. And this probably was at one point when I was interacting with a lot of atheists on Twitter, and a lot of them were being kind of harsh towards me. I had this dream that I was running down the road and all these people were chasing me, and I was running as fast. And if you saw me run, you guys would totally be laughing. Like it's hilarious to see me run. My husband thinks it's so funny. So I was running down the road and they were chasing me, and they had like these, and I heard the word anvil, and they were throwing like these little sword things at me. And I was like, weird. So I wake up and I'm like, anvil, isn't that like Bugs Bunny? And so I look it up online, and I found out these anvils are like ancient tools, and they're not like Bugs Bunny. Like there's these things that were being thrown at me in my dream, which was kind of weird. So that was one. I guess that was my way of diffusing my own anxiety.
Was I one of the people chasing you, SJ? Or?
No, it was like nameless, faceless, okay. Like strange people and wearing black, like chasing me down the road.
Like horns or anything? Like
horns?
Yeah.
No, I didn't. I just heard them yelling that they had to get me. They were coming to get me, and so that was kind of weird. But yeah, it's all. Have you guys ever had dreams with any religious figures or Jesus or anything like that?
I remember like when I was converting, I had various dreams about like Satan and hell and stuff. And I remember as well, like one Friday after work where I kind of like fell asleep in the day, and towards the end of the dream, I got killed or something. And as I was dying, I like shouted Jesus, and then I woke up. And that was
wow.
Those were my 2. But
that was when you were feeling like you were a Christian?
Yeah. Feeling like I was feeling like one. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm carefully wording that because
I know
I'm carefully wording that for a reason. So because
I don't remember any. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh yeah, no, go ahead and say.
I don't remember any dreams, particularly with any kind of religious figures. No.
So the reason, actually, it's kind of interesting that we're talking about dreams too, because one of the things that I was starting this conversation with was this idea with Pontius Pilate. Actually, you guys in the chat, I'm posting the link if anyone wants to join us and contribute here. I know we haven't been able to get Craig here, unfortunately, but love to have anybody else on too. But one of the things that the story started with was Pontius Pilate. He was kind of hesitant towards Jesus because his wife had a dream, and back in ancient times they really took dreams quite seriously. And so now we kind of joke around like, oh, I was dreaming I was flying and all this kind of stuff. But if they had a dream, a lot of times they felt like it really symbolized something important. And so the Bible's littered with lots of dreams. We've got Nebuchadnezzar's dreams and other dreams that were kind of interesting, so prophetic in a way that Daniel interpreted Nebuchadnezzar's dream and that kind of thing. And so I think that there is something to dreams that's kind of beyond the material explanation. I know that someone would say that, like, I think it goes beyond that. I don't know, just throwing it out there. What do you guys? Nathan, do you think everything can be explained through materialism, or are you open to having some sort of supernatural presence here?
Well, it depends what you mean by supernatural. I think like causation is probably like all causation seems to me to be natural, though I'm open to there being something outside of that. Mm-hmm. Maybe, I mean, like personally, I've not solved the hard problem of consciousness, so maybe there's something to that. And
You haven't solved it yet?
no, not
Come
yet.
on.
And
Slacker.
also like things like abstract objects, like the problems of like what's called like problems of universals. You know, like how can concepts apply to multiple things, like denoting terms. Like if I say to you, the non-existent, or sorry, the round square has never been drawn, right? That's like a meaningful sentence. It's not meaningful. And I think it's either true or false, but what does it actually denote then? Like, is there some object that it denotes? And what kind of object can that be? A round square? Because that seems like a logical contradiction. All those sorts of things fascinate me. But I mean, those could be like, I can't see how theism is really like a solution to any of these problems. Like it seems more likely that, some kind of universalism about like abstract objects or something is still more plausible than theism. But on the question of like what is truth, again, I don't have like strong opinions about that, but I could vaguely philosophically guide a conversation around that if that's how you want to keep it.
Well, I think, one of the reasons I asked you that question is because I'm thinking about we have natural explanations for a lot of things in our lives, and a lot of us look to natural explanations. We don't want to have go outside and have this experience and immediately say, oh, it was a ghost, or oh, it was this, or oh, it was that. We try to find the natural explanation first. But there's things that are really interesting, like abstract art and that sort of thing. When you look at art, a natural explanation of why a copy of the Mona Lisa captures millions of dollars really isn't there. It's just paint. It's on a canvas, but people place value on this art. And it's interesting that we're like that. And it speaks to something beyond just natural explanations for things. Why is it that we have this collective experience where we value the truth or justice or equity or fairness, all that? Why is that? Like, why are humans geared that way instead of valuing selfishness? And so there's a lot of stuff that kind of steers me towards more of a theistic position. I'm not going to which theistic position yet, but I'm just saying there's something there. Like, even if Aaron, if you're falling into, not falling, if you're kind of in that idea where you're kind of a new age thing.
I'm not. I see that you're draw that parallel a lot, but like I wouldn't say that I am at all.
Okay, good. No. I definitely don't want to mischaracterize. So
yeah,
but
I'm not.
What do you think? Sorry, why is it you think theism is a solution to those things? Like, why would you say those things push me towards theism rather than just saying like these are questions that I don't have an answer for? I suppose
because I look to a few things. One is I look to human exceptionalism, and I look at the way that we have things like language, art apprehension, beauty apprehension. We've got this idea that we should value rationality and reasoning. We've got ideas that we should a lot of times do self-sacrificing. And so when you look at the idea of self-sacrifice, even for strangers, sometimes that's not readily explained by our history or our social evolution. And so I feel like
because theism provides an explanation for those things.
Theism does provide an explanation. The Christian faith and the Jewish faith basically say that we're all made in the image of God. And so the fact that we're exceptional on this planet, I think, provides some support for this, the theistic underpinnings of all of that. And so,
but I suppose like there's a lot of other explanations that people give, and I'm wondering why it is that you'd like favor like a theistic one over, say, like there's certain types of atheism or certain types of physicalism where they'd still explain all those things. I'm not saying I agree with them. Or like Platonists who aren't Christians would say they can account for all those things, or Orphics, which was like the religion before like the Greek philosophers would say they account for all those things in a slightly different way. So why is it that theism is like a better explanation than
Plato still believed in the gods, by the way. Plato definitely believed in the gods, and Marcus Aurelius and others who have written kind of similar ideas on abstract concepts and things like that. They definitely believed in the gods. They just didn't know, just like Paul said when he was in Ephesus, when he said, who are you worshiping? This unknown God, that people were worshiping an unknown God. So I think, and even like Helen Keller was blind and couldn't hear. I mean, imagine being in that kind of a position. But she said she always felt like there was this guiding light inside of her. And finally, she discovered who that was, but she said she always had even though she was blind and she was deaf and had no real way to communicate with the word other than her feelings and her touch and that kind of thing, she always knew that she had this sense. And I think we all actually have that sense. I think that's something that's part of us, like this light within us. And so what I'm trying to say is, even if people don't make the right attributions, I mean, even if you thought I wasn't making the right attributions, and I know you do think I'm not making the right attributions, but even if I say, okay, I just think that there's a presence of other spiritual beings here. And so even if we say, you know, I'm a Hindu and I think it's those spiritual beings, or I'm a Muslim and I think it's Allah or whatever, but I feel that there's a sincere presence of something else. And the question is now, who is that, or what is that? So that's all.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm kind of sitting back quietly. I've done a lot of reading about like evolutionary psychology. I think that does offer some alternative suggestions as to why we have developed the way that we are, why we have empathy, why we care about other people, especially. I would say that I'm agnostic about the questions about otherly entities. Like, I mean, I'm not convinced that Christianity best explains those experiences.
I
have no position on it right now. I don't find the Christian explanation for those spiritual experiences any more compelling than I do like the Celtic fairy faith, or if people's experiences on DMT, experiencing the machine elves. There's so many different things, and I think there isn't quite an explanation quite for that yet. But I'm not willing to like offer one necessarily.
Yeah. So what I wanted to say is the evolutionary psychology. Cy Gart writes a lot against that. Actually, Cy Gart's a biochemist, and he's looked into evolutionary psychology. And why he does that is because a lot of the reasoning that evolutionary psychologists use is what they call post hoc reasoning, meaning that you look at an event and now you try to reason from the past of what could have happened. And so he looks to Rudyard Kipling, and the scientists call this just so reasoning, where you say, well, I see the giraffes out there have long necks just so that they can reach the tops of trees and get the leaves to eat. You know, or I see that we've got fingernails here. It must be just so we can scratch an itch if we have an itch on ourselves. Or, you know, it's like you're kind of making an observation and then trying to fit in some explanation. And it's the same thing with, I see that we're empathetic. Just so it must have been good.
But we can observe things we can currently observe them, like things like our mirror neurons and how those work. And that, you know, that is neurologically what's happening when we're experiencing empathy, or when we mimic each other, we have those reactions. We know that it's the mirror neurons, which we can currently observe.
I just see Eric's here. I think that's Eric Wendt, who was just on my channel yesterday. If you guys haven't heard that, he just put a super chat for $5. Thank you so much, Eric, for coming in. He shared why he left the Mormon faith and came to Christianity as a Baptist. And so that was pretty interesting. So if you guys haven't had a chance, definitely go and watch that. We've been encouraging Eric to set up a YouTube channel too. I think we're going to encourage Aaron to do that too. So sorry to have to do a little segue there. But that's one of the, I'm going to level with you on why I actually had to do the thing Monday. So I wake up in the morning as a person who's trying to publish academic papers. One of the worst things is the acceptance rates are so low in the kind of stuff I need to get published in that a lot of my papers get rejected. So I have to go around and keep trying to find a home for them. And so I wake up Monday and this paper I put in a journal, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, I made it past the desk rejection stage. And I was so happy. And then all of a sudden I got the letter, and like the two reviewers, one of them just lambasted my paper.
Reviewer two.
What's that?
It's always reviewer two, isn't it?
Yeah, reviewer two lambasted reviewer one was pretty positive, but reviewer two just wrote, like, I swear to God, I'm not kidding, like 6 pages of went through every line of my paper to talk about how he or she didn't like it, like all these things but it was really good because they actually offered a ton of stuff for improvement. And so I thought to myself, and it's, the kind of person I am, I can't concentrate if I've got that sitting on my desk on anything else. And so I just spent the last 2 days digging in, and I still have work to do, but I finally found a good journal opportunity. But anyway, the reason I'm bringing that up is because one of the things I have in that paper, it does talk a little bit about things like, the scientists have found heritability by looking at twins, and they found, for example, that if your parents have empathy actually is one of the constructs, you're more likely to inherit certain dimension of empathy. Intelligence is heritable. So they look at nature versus nurture on a lot of these sorts of things. My paper is not focusing at all on anything.
That reminds me of like the heritability between people who are engineers and their children having autism.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I've never heard that.
Yeah.
Wow, I wonder what that's from. I wonder why. That's interesting. Yeah. So that's something I've never heard. But yeah, so you, like, if your parents are intelligent, you're more likely to be intelligent. Conscientiousness is a really tough one. My paper's on personality stuff, and conscientiousness, or a lack of conscientiousness, God forbid, if you have a lack of conscientiousness, really bad things are going to happen.
So what would be the theistic explanation for like sociopathy or psychopathy? Like,
yeah, that's a good question. So that's actually what the paper's on. I'm focusing on the dark triad of personality. So, and not I've got Jacob Stripper Liquor here. Not sociopathy as much as, or psychopathy. I'm focusing on the dark triad, which is Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and what's that?
And borderline. Sorry, I keep interrupting.
Yeah. Narcissism. No, I'm looking at those psychopaths. That comprises about 1% of the population. But it's interesting. I was looking at what those factors correlated with on people's values. And you say, well, why are there psychopaths? It's a tough one. Why are there psychopaths? Here's the interesting thing. I've got a study that shows the last name is Cera. I believe CERA is the first author. There's 3 authors on the study, but they found that psychopaths know the difference between right and wrong, but they just don't care. That's actually the title of the paper. And so even if you're a psychopath, you're totally lacking empathy. And that's what I found in my paper. Of all those values, out of the 3 bad ones, Machiavellianism and narcissism and psychopathy, the psychopaths are the ones who have low levels of benevolence and universalism, which is care for the in-group, their own in-group, and care for the out-group and the environment. So they're kind of...
Do you think that it is possible to come up with an explanation through evolutionary psychology of why that would have been an advantage at some point?
I would say that's actually a good point. Yeah, evolutionary psychology, not so much, but what would be an advantage to be not caring for other people is you'd probably be ostracized in society, and you wouldn't get the marriage partners that people who could care for others.
In our current, our current society, but I'm wondering about
even in our current society, it seems that you can
there's narcissists that get to the top all the time, and psychopaths that get to the top all the time. There's even a benefit to it in our modern culture.
That's true, and that's why some of the evolutionary psychology is kind of hard to talk about, because we have 3% of corporate leaders are psychopaths. Okay, so 1% of the world's population is considered psychopath, but the ones who are gravitate to business, and a lot of them are really effective at hiding it and succeeding. Like they can pretend that they care even though they really don't care.
Well, that if you were to think about the past, it would be possible to imagine that somebody that had psychopathy had still methods to still use it to their advantage in the evolutionary past.
That's why I think it's hard to do an explanation, because selfishness is something that I see could be advantageous. Is that Jacob? You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jacob. Hi, Aaron. Hi, Nathan.
Hi.
Hi, SJ. How are you?
Hi, good.
That comment you just made, Aaron, I think there definitely is some evidence currently that may be the case. It seems to be perplexing how something like psychopathy, which we generally view as a horribly negative trait, that it could work its way in selecting with fitness in this way. If you kind of look at Jordan Peterson's explanations about our competency hierarchy and the dominant hierarchies, which are in all human societies and have been this way all the way back to the hunter-gatherer stages and whatever. The the people, and traditionally it's been men, the people in, smaller tribal or even in greater, as societies became agrarian or whatever, the people who were seen as the leaders were those who accomplished the most. They were the strongest warrior. They were the best hunters. They were the fastest. They did the most things. We understand that those with psychopathy, while it's not purely a diagnostic term, we all kind of have a good idea of what it means. People with psychopathy do imitate, even though they lack empathy and care for the feelings of others, they do imitate behaviors of others, and they do want to have things, although it's, accomplishments, and they do want to be around others, even though maybe it's not the same as for those of us with empathy. But when anyone in any dominance hierarchy, whether it's, say, a small hunter-gatherer tribe or an emerging society or whatever, if you're a person who works really hard and knows how to do things, you have a level of intelligence, but more importantly, you kind of don't let care for others in small ways get in the way. You instead make decisions that may be not so advantageous for certain people along the way, maybe even harmful to them, but you do that in trying to reach your goals of being the head of the religious group, or the head of the tribal councils, or the greatest warrior who's more respected. You will achieve that. That's part of what we see modern day with the higher number of psychopaths in the higher corporate, in the highest corporate positions. And what that does evolutionarily, if you look to how Dawkins kind of describes it, the selfish gene, and then it's extrapolation to the greater. Men in those positions will have more chances for sexual reproduction. That's part of what the dominance hierarchy does. And Jordan Peterson explained, how this happened very, very brilliantly. He's just such a brilliant man. And whether we today, by our social norms, whether we agree with it or say, no, it's not that way, men at the top of any field who are admired and dominant, women have a tendency to be far more willing to have sexual relations with them. And until the 20th century, sexual relations really meant a lot more pregnancies and a lot more spreading of your genes. So while it's kind of piecing it, a lot of different components together, one could see how that this selection for reproduction, which is the basis of the reproductive genes, all the way down to the DNA level, selection for reproduction could very definitely fit within an evolutionary advantage, albeit one that to us morally, intellectually, and societally is one that is extremely distasteful. And if someone does those things and they're like stepping on the shoulders of others, climbing up the corporate ladder, may be something they, quote, get away with. But if they get to the level of being able to of doing harm to other people that goes outside of the accepted norms of the social group, then they will either be punished or if they kill people, they'll be put in jail, maybe executed, and so forth. So I just wanted to kind of add that. I think it's a fascinating idea about why, if you believe in evolution, why would psychopaths continue to be made, so to speak?
Yeah, why would they serve? Well, you do bring up a good point. I think of it. First, I want to say thank you to Taking Back Eden John. He did another super chat, and he says, "Conditioning, Pavlov's dogs, and lies affect the mind." Yeah, I think there could be behavioral conditioning sometimes we see with humans, and some awful experiments that people have done in the past, scientific experiments where they had IRB approval. Now we have to get IRB approval to do test experiments. But anyway, those are really good points. And I like that you incorporated Jordan Peterson. You're reminding me of something, though, that exactly all this played out. So you've got Enron, and you've got this guy called Jeffrey Skilling and another guy called Kenneth Lay. And Jeffrey Skilling, if you watch The Smartest Guys in the Room, was totally the textbook example of a psychopath who's corporate psychopath. And he took Enron from actually being a successful company to killing Enron, because he came up with this mark-to-market accounting, and they started just inventing their own numbers. And it's a long story, but the bottom line is, like you said, his influence, he was at the top of the hierarchy. He had tons of money. And just like anyone says, there's a lot of women out there who are willing to, must be the money, right? And so he had tons of money. I'm sure he could have had his pick of the litter. He's in jail now, like you also predicted. But one of the things that he influenced in that company was, in the video, you saw these people, like this one guy standing on these stairs, and he's like, if I got to step on 10 guys to get ahead, I'm going to do it. And I'm like, what kind of attitude is that? And that's how Enron was. That's the corporate culture. And that's what he facilitated, this macho, this whole, he'd run out with the guys, and they'd all be on these big bikes, and they'd run around and do motorbikes and do all kinds of things. And they were danger, running through danger and trying to have, just hedonist stimulation. It's so funny because it also corresponds, like in the study that I just did, Machiavellianism, which is this idea that you're going to go deceive people and take advantage of them and all this kind of stuff. That corresponds to high levels of hedonism and stimulation, meaning like personally trying to looking after things that are just more material in life. So anyway, but yeah, so I think one of the things that I think all of us could probably fairly agree is that it's very complex, and to try to make sort of explanations for a lot of the stuff that we see, there's such a complex human history that we have, and so many factors involved to what make us what we are, that it's kind of hard to even make hypotheses.
So sort of, but I think what we do is we have like our experience of things, and we have some empirical data, right? But then what we do is we come up with like an explanation for that data, and then we might compare our explanation to other explanations and see, well, which of these explanations is more simple, for example, or how does this explanation stack up against our intuitions of how the world is? But using these various kind of like explanatory virtues, then we can compare and say, actually, this explanation over here is better because it doesn't need all this extra stuff. And even though I agree that a lot of what happens in evolutionary psychology might be like just so stories, a lot of the things it puts forward as well seem to me to still be better explanations than sort of like, well, it's just a part of being in a fallen world or something like that, because it's simpler. It only postulates things that I know exist. Like I know that people who successfully reproduce are going to pass on their traits genetically. I know that if people die off, that those traits are going to be removed from the allele frequency in a population. Whereas I don't know, like I can't measure or see original sin or anything like that, or its effects. I can't predict what its presence would do and what the lack of its presence would do, and collect any data around that. It's not like a that explanation of psychopaths doesn't seem to be as good as the one from evolutionary biology.
Yeah, I mean, those are good questions. I'm still thinking about things like that. One of the things that biology can pretty well explain, or at least show, just watching animals and watching different species, is they can show that what was I going to say? They can show that it's beneficial to help the in-group. And so we have a history of animals protecting their own, bees protecting the hive, doing this kind of stuff where they're trying to help their own in-group. But that's always a lot of times to the detriment of the out-group, meaning that the invaders come and they kill the out-group or something like that. And so we even see that in human history where you definitely had a lot of clans going around there and protecting themselves to the detriment of others. What's interesting, though, is when you see these cross-cultural surveys these days, is they're finding that people cross-culturally, like from Shalom Schwartz, studying thousands and thousands of people around the globe, is that people have these values in a hierarchy that's always ordered exactly the same way. There's 3 top values. The very top is always benevolence, that's care for the in-group. Then universalism, which is care for the out-group and the environment. And then there's self-direction. And men and women reverse the order. For men, it's benevolence, self-direction, and universalism. For women, it's benevolence, universalism, and self-direction. Self-direction meaning you're taking yourself and holding yourself accountable. But I'm pointing that out because this idea of universalism is kind of weird, given our evolutionary history. Where did this idea that we should help strangers, say in Africa, by sending donations to orphanages, where'd that come from? So why should we do something like that? So it's not to say that people also know that that's just the right thing to do. So where did this idea that that's the right thing to do come from?
I think an interesting thing that correlates with that slightly, SJ, is that, our behavior as individuals and then also in groups does change if we are in a personal state of privation or in a group in a state of privation. If you have taking a small society from, antiquity, if you were suffering and your approach as a group and as individuals is going to be one that focuses on self-preservation, and the further out someone is from your in-group, the less you care. You're more focused on yourself and your immediate kin and your immediate group.
Mm-hmm.
But as the group you're in, as privation goes away and abundance comes in, our mindset individually and then also in the group starts turning more toward benevolence to those who are further away from us. And so, again, to kind of mention something that Jordan Peterson had said, he talked about how one of the things that's kind of hard for us today to understand is that really up through the 1800s, that most people lived lived in a spot of privation or extreme privation, that we don't necessarily view history that way. We think that most people who have been alive were in a satisfactory middle class, so to speak, and that there were some that were poor and suffering. Maybe there were some that were slaves. Maybe there were some that were, separating and had problems this way. And then there were certain amounts who were the upper crust or the elites or whatever. But he explained that it's actually, and I don't know enough about history to have verified this myself. I kind of trust his research. I think he's fairly credible. So he basically explained that it was a little more like, no, there was a heavy amount of elites with people with a lot, and then most everybody else didn't really have very much. Kind of like a little bit of the direction we've been experiencing in America with the lessening of the middle class. And since I've been alive and lived in this for a few decades, I can definitely see that just the general feel of things, for example, in America today, is very, very different than it was 40 years ago. People are really, I hear people say things and they get a feel for what happens in society, that while we've always had problems, it's kind of a little bit different. So I think that that's something that's that's difficult to factor in, because we factor things, Nathan was mentioning some good things. We factor things in based on our experience. That's how we understand information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, Jonathan Haidt has also pointed out, people subsisted on what's the equivalent of about $1 a day, the vast majority of the planet. We didn't have a middle class. It was, you're either really rich or you're incredibly poor. And so that's how it was all throughout the centuries. In most places. And then it started, most people. And then, the United States started building sort of a middle class through this industrialization and through, trying to build a middle class through different forms, and capitalism, that's actually something. But to your other point, you're definitely right. Actually, if you look at our income distribution right now between wealthy and poor, the income gap is about what it was at the turn of the last century. And so it's actually very high. There's a big difference between the rich and the poor. There is a healthy middle class, but not quite as much like you said. It was healthier around 1950s when we had a lot of unionization. 25% of people were unionized and were protected and given lots of workplace protections and pay and things like that by unions. And you just don't see that today. So we've got a pretty significant difference. And that's fueling a lot of anger in the United States and other places like this. So I don't want to keep, now Erin hasn't had a chance to say too much, and I know she had something to say, and I don't know if we've rolled down the hill to too many topics, right?
I can't remember. Yeah, I do remember. But it does circle us back just when you're talking about why should we care about or why do we care about people in Africa? I think I had mentioned earlier, like our empathy abilities, which are explained pretty well through our mirror neurons, and the fact that we can actually we can see with cameras and reporting, and we can see people suffering, and that obviously is going to trigger us to feel empathy.
Explain the mirror neurons, because I haven't heard that empathy and mirror neurons.
Well, I'm not a very good science communicator, but I'll try.
Okay, yeah, no, honestly, I haven't heard that. Are you saying that maybe they light up a little bit when we're doing something that's kind for others?
Yeah, if you go look up mirror neurons, they explain it, and other animals have these as well, like the chimpanzees and other animals that do have, like, this is how they're also talking about how empathy is not just necessarily a human trait, but there is a part of your brain that when you see another human, especially, like if you see somebody doing something, you actually, what happens in their brain happens in your brain. They've done this on like fMRI scans where they can see your brain acting like what you see. It's a form of mimicking. So mirror neurons are the reason why when someone yawns, you yawn. That's how humans, it's part of the social makeup of our brain too, and how we react to other people. But it's directly related to our empathy. And so, I mean, theoretically, if they were to scan somebody who had psychopathy, their head, they would not show that same mirror neuron reaction when they saw someone else suffering or even doing certain actions. You can even see it too when people are talking to each other. Sometimes they'll imitate each other. One person crosses their arms, another person will cross their arms. Mm-hmm. So likewise, if you see somebody in pain, it makes you feel about what it would feel like if you were in that same pain. That's kind of the explanation of what empathy is.
Do they use that same explanation for, like, say, for example, you witness somebody winning the lotto? Like, my husband watches these shows where these people get on and just start spending like crazy. He's super, like, incredibly self-centered. And then that triggers not that you want to win the lotto or you want to feel good for them. Instead, it triggers jealousy or something.
I'm not sure. I haven't looked at like what is the neurology of greed or envy, but the empathy thing, that seems to be, for me, a really good explanation for it, as something we can observe too. We can observe it in scannings, we can observe it in our day-to-day lives as well. And I mean, I think about myself when I was younger too, and like feeling, I remember not being able to sleep at night because I would be crying because I had watched a video about kids that were starving in Africa, and I couldn't function. I was so upset. I made my parents get a donate some money to so we had like a, but I think that's a very clear, when I was reading about and learning about the mirror neurons, I was like, well, that explains that experience for me, why when I saw it, I'd heard about it, but it wasn't until I saw it that I immediately was heartbroken for them. Mm-hmm.
No, I think
Erin, could I ask you, I'm sorry.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
I was going to ask Erin a question about that.
Mm-hmm.
What you just explained is pretty fascinating. There's something that I was learning about people's responses to bad situations in others, and this was involving charitable situations. And it explained how that if a problem is presented and there's like one child who's given as the example of this particular problem, maybe it's poverty in another area, that people's likelihood to respond and donate was the highest. As soon as the second child was added in and the story was told about these two children, they drop. And the more people that are put into, the more it's, let me put it this way, the more it's shown that the problem is being experienced by a large group, not by an individual within that group, that people's response, their empathetic responses and their response to acting drops way down. Do you think that this somehow kind of correlates with what you understand about the mirror neurons in that maybe we're not, when we hear about, oh yeah, everybody in this country over here is starving, can you give to them? But if they show one child from this country that it's like, do you think there's a correlation there?
I think it's harder to picture. Well, I don't. First of all, I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but I'm like just thinking about it. That like, if it's hard to relate to an entire group, for one thing. Also, I think the part of your brain that really quickly does the cost benefit, and like whether you're able to, as a single person, help an entire group, probably comes in there. So it's like probably something to do with the back and forth there in your mind. I think it's probably a lot easier to relate and have that empathy when you have a full story of maybe a single person. That's kind of my first thoughts on that, but I don't really know. I think I am much more likely to think I have a chance of actually like helping, if it's an attainable goal, like helping one person.
I think that seems like a reasonable response. I see, I want to say, because Brother John here in the chat says, I don't think Africa's problems are money. They have plenty of natural resources. It's the corruption of power. Your money goes into a vacuum. I have to say, Brother John, there's a really good book, but it's old, but it's called Culture Matters. And it was written by a bunch of people who were at this university event at one of those Ivy League universities. And they talk about that same exact thing, is how corruption, also in South America and the elites, they talk a lot about how that influences what's going on there. And unfortunately, you're right. We see tons of that, especially in places like Nigeria. And so it's really unfortunate. So just wanted to pack that in there real quick.
I want to say goodbye. I've got to drop out. SJ, thanks for having me on. Nathan, it was a pleasure to be here in the chat with you. Same with you, Aaron. It was
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to chat with you.
I hope you guys all have a great day.
Yeah, you
Take
too.
care.
Thank you for coming on.
Okay, you're welcome. Bye-bye.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting looking at all this kind of stuff and trying to figure out how you can put it together. I have a quiz for you, because this is something that is, I've been studying these topics because this is what my academic stuff is on. So I would have intuitively, I'm going to see which way you guys answer. Do you think, so say we have these values, and there's values like things like benevolence and universalism and what are some other ones that I just want to name real quickly? So benevolence, universalism, self-direction, achievement, striving. So we have all these values. And then we have certain personalities, like your personality you might use the ocean, where it's openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So those are just some personality factors. And I'm using the ones that aren't like the dark triad. So it's like we're looking at positive personality characteristics in general, because the opposite of the neuroticism one is the emotional stability. But anyway, which do you think comes first, like chicken and the egg? Do you think that your personality is the more stable trait, or do you think your values might emanate from your personality, or your personality comes from your values? Do you know what I'm saying? Like you're,
Yeah.
you're born. Okay, so go ahead.
Well, I would think that I don't know. I think that probably the more stable thing is your personality, and your values are less so. That's what I would think.
What do you think, Nathan?
I don't really have like a strong view. I can't really come up with any reason why it should be one way or the other. So
okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I'll stick with my answer for now.
Your answer is the right answer. And because I actually thought, I would have thought it was the opposite, because I was trying to look directionally which way to create these hierarchical regression equations. And so I was thinking, okay, should one do the other? And so I looked at the literature, and it's actually, your personality is stable. It tends to be heritable. It tends to, and that's why I said it's kind of scary if you have weak conscientiousness, because that actually correlates with low job performance and a lot of bad outcomes in life. But your personality is pretty stable, hard to change, super hard to change. But your values, a lot of times because of your personality, you might do certain actions, and then you form your values to understand why you did those actions. And it's super interesting when you think about it, if you look at, so your values are actually more in flux. Like you can actually modify your values, whether you want to be achievement striving or you want to be benevolent or something like that. So yeah, it's kind of, I don't know.
To me.
That's what I'm studying. So that's what I was doing Monday when we could have been talking. Trying to address this issue. So what else do you guys want to talk about?
We could talk about what truth is.
Oh, yeah.
So truth to me, I mean, just to define truth, a lot of people call it, who did I see this with? Matt Dillahunty. Truth to me is what's in alignment with facts, right? And so then Matt Dillahunty distinguishes that from what he called capital T truth, which is like, what's the truth of the world? And I think that's the big question that we have today is we know that there's certain truths, like there's a book right now on top of my desk, but that's a fact. I'm looking right at it and I could show you it if you need to see it. I can show you the pile that I've got actually of 5 books here. But then we're getting into what he called like the truth of why are we here? What is our purpose? Do we have a purpose? Or are we just, lucky clumps of cells? So what do you guys think?
I think
do you ever look into those big questions?
Yeah, I think Matt's definition is that which comports with reality. I think that's the phrasing that he uses.
Okay. Hey, have you been on his show?
No, I mean, no, I haven't been on his show yet. I was on an ACA show. I was on Truth Wanted. I'm friends with Dan, and I haven't met Matt yet. he's on my list of people to try to convince to be my friends. We do follow each other, but no, I haven't actually met him yet.
Oh, really? He follows you? Gosh, he's got me blocked. I get the good treatment.
I do question these
over
things.
a year.
I do question these things sometimes. Talking about like the truth, like I do question. I'm not a big philosopher, honestly. It's tough for me. I don't think I would come up with a satisfying answer for anybody, but I might be able to answer questions if you were to ask me, do you think this is true or that true? Or it's definitely a weak spot for me, is like coming up with like a syllogism to explain anything.
Yeah, I'm not really into it's hard coming up with syllogisms actually to try to explain. I think it's easier just to try to talk it out. So.
Yeah, I'm good with conversation. I'm not so good with the deeper philosophical, even just the terminologies. So something I'm learning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I spent yesterday watching a video of, I can't remember which scientific group. I want to say it's NASA, but it was on the universe. And it was super cool. Like it actually showed how all these planets looked and what their characteristics are and all this kind of stuff. And I thought there's so much to learn. There's so much. What do they say? Something like we know less than 1%, 100% of us know way less than 1% of what's going on in the universe. And I actually think that's true because it's incredibly complicated and big and it's way beyond our minds, And so that was a cool video. Actually, I shared it on Twitter if you guys go and want to see it, if anyone's interested in that kind of thing. So what would it take are any of you leaning towards, have you investigated, let me ask this, because I know you said you've investigated Christianity, but have you investigated maybe say the Muslim faith or the Hindu faith or Buddhism or anything like that? Have you done a deep dive in any of those?
Not as much as Christianity for me.
Not as much,
Yeah.
I know enough. I think enough about like Islam and Judaism. I think for me, during my deconstruction, I kind of deconstructed Judaism as well. So that kind of off the Abrahamic religions for me. I do read a lot of Buddhism as far as some of their practices. I don't think their cosmology or anything like that makes any more sense to me. Lately, I've been like looking a little bit more into like the pre-Christian Celtic religions because I just find those interesting. But mostly I started to look through all of these different religions through kind of that cultural myth lens to see like what was the story, what did it mean to people, what are some truths that we can pull from them now. It's more of an anthropological kind of thing for me now, is like looking back on these things. So I'm not sure if I'm looking at it from like a truth claims as I am so much about just kind of learning the cultural stories. Yeah,
no, that's interesting.
I've looked into, Helba and Heathen said, I've been looking at Druidism or Druids and Celtic polytheism and the Gaelic religions. So things I'm really interesting. That's my heritage, I think. So it's just fun to read about what they were before they became Christian.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And have you heard of this idea of perennialism?
Yeah, I have. I understand why some people would stick to that. That explains a lot of why there would be so many different types of religion and why there are some key factors that are similar. but I mentioned this in another stream with like, that is an explanation for that. I still am not convinced that there are like these supernatural entities, even in plural form, like, or, you know, that out there. So I still think that the better explanation for that is, you know,
how do you deal?
experiences.
How do both of you deal with people who say that they've had spiritual experiences, or they've encountered spiritual beings or something, or demons or something like that? How do you reconcile that? Because that's been going on since as far back as we've been able to record. We've got humans in all different cultures who say that they've come into some sort of contact with spiritual beings, a spiritual force, higher power. I mean, they all worship something, even if they're worshiping the sun or they're worshiping trees or something like that. There's a lot of worship going on, and to me, a simple explanation is that there actually is something else out there that we should probably try to connect with. But the harder explanation is that they're all just, you know, loopy. They don't know what they're thinking about. They're just trying to, you know, to me, that's hard to explain.
I would first of all say, yeah, I bet you did have an experience. I would want to know about it. I don't think all experiences are exactly the same. I think that, like, I've looked into this a lot because I grew up in a Pentecostal background. So like I know lots of people who've had demonic encounters and all sorts of things in that area. I think that, again, the explanations for like a lot of the experiences that I'm aware of have explanations to do with the way our brain works, and different things to do with our, you know, the entity detections and the peripheral visions, and even how our mind can kind of project figures in a certain state of sleep. I think that, like, there's a whole bunch of things that we know now about the brain that explain that for me. I don't think that those experiences are any like less real to the person who has had them. I've had them myself, like I've said, but I found enough defeaters in the, you know, in the literature about how our brains work to kind of do a bit of a, I don't know, I lost my confidence in those experiences, and I moved to the side of it's probably not real.
Did you have positive or negative experiences? Did you have any negative experiences?
Both. Yeah.
Okay.
Both.
Would you want to share any of them with us?
Well, okay. So I did grow up in a very like spiritual warfare type focused church, and there was lots of talk about demons, and I did struggle with like sleep, lots of times, like sleep problems. So I mentioned this earlier. So sleep paralysis, I would often feel like I had a demon sitting on my chest. I would, I have an experience from when I was younger, thinking I heard my name in my bed. I wouldn't like that. In my early 20s, like, so I have mentioned before that I was married for a short time when I was like 19, 20. His family were actually, they had a deliverance ministry. So they did do a lot of exorcisms. So I did like witness exorcisms. And as well as the whole time I was with this guy, I also struggled with what I would call like demonic, like not possession, but like oppression. So like that whole time I was with him, I did really struggle with like nightmares and feeling like I had a presence behind me or watching me, like just all constantly that kind of thing growing up. But then when I started to like when we broke up and when I moved away from that, like I really did question some of that, and I did move away from the theology, and that also made those experiences stop. So my husband, who I'm with now, like he never bought into any of that stuff. Like he was from a totally different kind of background, so he kind of helped me move out of that way before I ever deconverted. And then good experiences, I mean, I had tons of good experiences at church and at youth group and at Bible camp and in my own personal life. And I have journals and journals and journals that I still have now that I record different things that I had experienced on a positive end.
Would you say that you were high in, like, if you know the difference between extrinsic and intrinsic religiosity? Intrinsic is sort of a close relationship with God. It's trying to build this relationship, this personal relationship with God. And that extrinsic is this idea more that it's kind of, you're going to church because you want the community or you want the benefits of the church and that sort of thing.
I was very intrinsically religious because I actually kind of didn't like church for the last 10 years.
Okay.
I would say that the reason why I would say that is because it took me a long time to stop praying. It was a natural inclination for me to pray. And and if anything, I did struggle with, I struggled with any like pragmatic reasons why I should go to church, because I found it so frustrating for the last few years. But I still believe strongly.
Does your husband, does he believe in anything?
Yeah, he's a Christian.
Okay. Does he ever try to like all of a sudden give you, hey, did you hear about this Bible verse, or what do you think about this, or do you hear the story of the Bible being saved in the fire, or you do any of that kind of stuff?
I think we've moved to a different point of our relationship now, where we kind of it's kind of just an ongoing joke. He'll come home from work and tell me about something fascinating. He's like, "See, Jesus is real," and I'm like, "That's cool." So, but we definitely had some conversations early in my kind of deconstruction, because I expected him to have all the answers because he was my spiritual leader. He didn't, and I would get mad. Eventually, I kind of eased up on that. We've had some really good conversations, but it's not a big deal for us. He never has believed in like ECT or those kind of things. He's more of a universalist. His theology is more C.S. Lewis universalism, so he's not that worried about me either. And he actually says that in a lot of ways things have been better since I deconverted.
I don't think I'd call C.S. Lewis a universalist.
No, but he believes in my husband believes in a purgatory type state of refinement.
Okay.
Before he doesn't believe that anyone will be tortured forever.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's different ways to read the book, but I think C.S. Lewis, the big contention, the difference between me and C.S. Lewis is I'm not sure, like I wouldn't gamble that for sure you get to make a choice after death. Like, because it's not spelled out in the Bible anywhere that in that period in Hades, when you're waiting for the final judgment, that you get to actually change your mind over what you had decided on earth. And that's the clincher for me, where C.S. Lewis thinks from his Great Divorce book, it seems to indicate that he thinks that there is a choice and that people keep getting the choice and the train keeps going back and forth.
Yeah,
and so,
I think the Great Divorce is a great example of my husband's theology.
Yeah, I want to say, I see a question here from Irish with some son, and I've never seen her on my channel, so I think it's
I know her.
You know her? Okay, so it says, I wonder if SJ believes it's
I think it might be a him.
a true Christian.
I think
it's a yeah.
Say it again?
Yeah.
I think it's a.
I think it's a guy, but he's took a picture of himself with like a face
really?
filter art thing. I think that's what
I'm
it
not
is.
sure
I might be
either.
wrong.
Tell us, Irish with some sun.
Yeah, tell us more about yourself. What's your first name? And anyway, so okay, so the thing I think with as far as being a true Christian, I don't really like the whole who's a true Christian, because the word true Christian, it connotes that there are some people who are false Christians. Now, do I think that there are wolves in sheep's clothing? Yes, I see them in some of the churches, unfortunately. I see them sometimes behind the pulpit, you know. I think we definitely have some of that, some people steering people awry intentionally. And so yes, definitely see that. But as far as the true Christian, I think the question is going to Hebrews, is it 6:4 or 4:6? But it's the verse about once you've tasted God, that it'd be crucifying Jesus all over again. So it's impossible for somebody to come back. I think that in God's great knowledge and prescience and omniscience, that he wouldn't put someone in a position where you get that full glimpse of the joy that there is, if there's a possibility that that person is going to walk away. So I feel like you could definitely have felt like you had all the experiences, and you probably did. But I would say, and this maybe sounds like a stretch to some people, but I would say that there's still more that maybe you hadn't reached that pinnacle. So you're still, there's still a possibility of coming back because you haven't reached the pinnacle. That's my answer to that. So Iris with some sun is laughing. Oh, so Craig Reed. Yeah. So there's a little conversation.
Yeah, I think I was right with my observation. I think it's a guy who's done a photo
Okay.
with FaceApp.
Okay, cool.
Looking good.
FaceApp, I haven't done FaceApp. What does that do? Like you put your face in there and it puts somebody else's face on?
Oh my gosh.
Well, you can do like, yeah.
I have the funniest picture of me and my brother, and we look like twins. I did a face one where I was just, I think it was on Snapchat, and it was like, it makes your face look like a man, but I had no makeup on that day, and my brother and I do look quite a lot alike. And I went and I put the face app on myself, and I went and sat next to my brother, and I made the same face as him, and we were like identical twins. It's so funny.
Oh, that is funny.
Yeah.
So Cafe, you guys, if you're in the crowd and you have questions for any of my guests here today, just go ahead and ask, and if they're willing to answer them, they'll answer them, because it looks like Cafe has a question. It says, are you, Aaron, are you familiar with the Johns Hopkins studies where atheist volunteers are given a single high dose of psilocybin, the drug that psilocybin. Yeah, I can't say it. And become ex-atheist after that experience. Have you guys heard that? Because Jordan Peterson talks about that.
Well, they don't become ex-atheists.
They don't become Christians necessarily, though. They become convinced of more supernatural things. Yeah, well, there's also a really good.
They've had a religious experience rather than.
Yeah, I believe that if you take psilocybin, you will have a spiritual experience.
Yeah. So.
But I've also had that, and I'm still an atheist.
Oh, you've tried that psilocybin?
I have.
Okay. I can honestly say I've never tried anything like that. I've never tried mushrooms or any of that stuff because I don't want to have that kind of, like, I think I'd kind of freak out. I don't want to see things coming out of the wall or, I just don't. I don't want to see pink elephants dancing around.
Joe Rogan's DMT. This psilocybin is in magic mushrooms. Yeah.
Joshua Howard says,
Nathan and I need to have that conversation still.
Yeah. That's an interesting, So Joshua says, do I think it's okay to take psychedelic drugs if it might make someone more spiritual? I know some Christians who think it's demonic. I really am not a fan of psychedelic drugs unless there's some sort of clinical use for it. And so, I don't know. I think there's other ways to tap into God. But if it does work to bring people back, using them once, no more than once, then maybe that's okay. I don't know.
But what about those? A lot of Christians do actually think it's demonic, though. The experiences people have. Like, what do you have an opinion about that, SJ? Or?
For example, if we look into things like the occult practices and some of those kind of things, there's certain things that you can do that you can open the door to the demonic. And people in the occult have done that. And like, if you go to Hugh Ross's books and you look at that, a lot of them think that they have encountered aliens. And a lot of them, and you can rule out something like 99% of alien experiences is due to naturalistic causes. But there's this one little alien experience called the residual UFO. And in the residual UFO experiences, a lot of people actually have some really traumatic things happen to them where they're like scratched or they feel like somebody had probed them or they disappear and they don't remember things for 24 hours or something like that. So there's some crazy stuff out there that's worthwhile to look into. Mm-hmm. So Hellbone Heathen, he said this before, he studied the occult and he has not had these experiences. So,
no UFOs.
No UFOs. Maybe he needs to go, if he does psilocybin though, maybe he will, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Psilocybin will just
psilocybin,
cause you to increase your empathy and mirror neurons towards everyone. And you might become a vegan or something, but
yeah. So are either of you guys vegans?
I am not, but it's a tough topic for me because my husband's a major meat eater, so I'm not a huge meat eater. And it's one I still kind of like. I totally see the point of becoming vegan. But I also have like a husband and two kids who all like love their chicken nuggets, and my husband loves the steak. So it's like, it's kind of tough, but I personally just don't eat a lot of meat, but for other reasons as well. Cause I just have stomach issues. But.
Yeah. I eat meat, but it's because my husband's the same way as yours. He loves steak. He loves all that stuff. My kids love chicken nuggets and steak, and
it's really hard.
It is. It's
also very hard to go gluten free if you have kids because those dang goldfish crackers are everywhere.
Yeah, that just reminded me. I ordered a book for my mom on that kind of. My mom actually, somebody
she knows what she's getting for Christmas now. SJ, you've ruined it.
Yeah, she's not watching. My mom, unfortunately, has got a kind of advanced stage of Lewy body dementia, and she's gotten to the point where she can barely communicate. And somebody on Twitter said, if I read this book, that maybe there's a diet in this book. So I ordered the book for her, and it says about gluten-free. This gluten-free idea.
Which book is that? I've probably read it. Everything to do with the paleo autoimmune protocol diet, low FODMAP, low, all of that. I've read them all. I've done them all because I have an autoimmune disease.
I'll have to go back and see which one it was. I ordered it, but I'll have to double check and I'll let you know. So you can tell me.
There are some diets that I genuinely did feel better on when I was trying to treat my autoimmune disease myself when I was between medications. But
yeah, no, I don't know if you know this, but I have psoriasis, and I've been able to.
We have talked about that, yeah.
Yeah, I've been able to treat it really well with this topical medicine that I found. It's actually over the counter. It's awesome.
Wasn't it clay or something?
Yeah, no, it's coal tar.
Tar, right? Yeah,
It actually
I remember that.
totally really did a great job. But I've also got a diet thing going, and I haven't had pork since I was 22. It's because I read that pork is like the worst thing for psoriasis, which so I get no bacon. Sorry.
Does that help confirm the Old Testament law to you?
Yeah, for me, I mean, it worked out for me. It's like it's actually, and I noticed one time I accidentally I haven't had pork, but I remember right around the time when I had gone off pork, I somehow accidentally had some. I remember having eggs, and somebody had put pork stuff in the eggs, like they put, what was it called, the grease, sausage grease or something into the eggs, and I had this horrible breakout like right after that. And so I remember going back and asking, I said, what'd you put in the eggs? It seemed like it had a different taste. Oh, sausage grease. I'm like, oh, why'd you do that to me? So what's your food list that you'd recommend, Erin, for people if you're trying to?
No, I can't do raw. I would not recommend a list for anybody because everybody's different. Okay. I have Crohn's disease, so I have to do a very particular diet, but I wouldn't recommend it to anybody.
Because like Jordan Peterson's daughter's on some diet where all she'll eat now is red meat.
Oh, that would put me in the hospital.
Yeah,
I would think that would put me in there too. So Spartan Theology says he would love to have a conversation about diets and autoimmune diseases. His wife suffers from similar things, and he loves to hear what's worked for you.
Yeah, sure. Before I was ever vocal online with like my faith deconstruction, I did a lot of advocacy for my health community. That's what I had this like tattoo on my wrist is a spoon.
Awesome.
It's because I'm a spoonie. I am part of the chronic illness community, and so I've talked about this a lot with people. But anytime.
Great. Yeah. I've had a lot of people who've had certain conditions. Like I've had a couple people who've had MS, and a lot of people are dealing with these really chronic, pretty awful conditions. So I wish you guys all the best. And I can kind of empathize in a way because I've had mine I've had mine since I was in 6th grade, and it was really, really bad at some points. So it's just,
so you would have been about 11 or so?
Yeah, I was in.
That's when I got sick too.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's when it happened. And so, and it wasn't that bad back then. It just started getting a little worse. By the time I was in college, it was just downright wretched. It was horrible. Mm-hmm. And so, but anyway, so we all you have to deal with that kind of. One of my friends said something funny growing up a long time ago. She said, everybody has an organ that's a problem. Everyone has a problem organ. And I'm like, she goes, name someone who doesn't. And I'm like, well, what do you have? You don't have skin problems. What's your problem? And she said, oh, she had stomach problems. Mm-hmm. And so if you go around, if you ask everybody, they might have allergies or something.
I was just going to say, my husband is like the healthiest person, but no, he's like almost blind. His eyes are so bad. So that's true.
Yeah,
that is what truth is.
Okay, we've discovered truth. The truth. Can anybody here identify someone who hasn't? Because I don't actually know anybody who doesn't have some sort of condition, something that they're trying to manage.
So far, my kids seem pretty good, but who knows?
They're younger too.
Yeah.
My oldest son his eyes keep getting worse, so there's that, I guess. But that's crazy. And my youngest son, I need to work on his conscientiousness. We have an issue there. That's why I'm working on it. He's probably going to watch this video, and he knows I just said that. So we're working on it. We're working on getting schedules down and doing that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So how have you been dealing with your kids and this whole COVID thing and all that kind of stuff? Has it been pretty hard on them for school?
So my daughter is 8. So last year, or in the springtime, she was in grade 2. And I actually did pull her out of school a few days before we locked down, I guess, here in Canada. But the really unfortunate thing for us was that we actually moved in April. So not only did we just like pull her out of school, we also moved to a different city, and she moved to school. So she wasn't even able to say goodbye to her friends or anything.
Oh, Nathan. That's tough. That's really tough.
So, and then the other part is that she's quite outgoing. I'm more of an introvert. My son and I can both just stay home all the time. We're fine. For her, it was challenging because it was a lot more loss for her. A lot of her, loss of her friends group, loss of play dates and things that she was used to, loss of being able to go to dance and gymnastics and the things that she normally. She's a very active kid, so it was hard. And then we were home for 6 months straight. She is in school now, and their school has been fantastic with their protocols and everything. I feel totally confident in them with her. So we're doing okay. It was just a little bit of added tension because of the move.
Oh yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
the timing couldn't probably be worse, unfortunately.
Yeah, it was horrible because we were like in the middle of the lockdown. So it's like, who is safe to even help us move right now? We couldn't get like a moving company or anything. We ended up, it was tough. Yeah.
But we expected. Here's the thing, though. Do you remember when the whole thing started? I thought it was going to be over in a couple of weeks. Like I wasn't fantasizing that it'd be completely over, but I thought that most of the lockdowns would be over if we just did that 2 weeks and tried to get rid of it. But I was sort of that didn't happen.
I will like say that like the beginning of the pandemic, actually, I had a lot of rapture and end time triggering happening, and I ended up having to see my counselor again for a few sessions because it triggered me so badly.
Yeah. It's been. I'm just shooting Craig a link. He wants to try to get in here again. So I can go probably about another 20 minutes or so. Or yeah.
Yeah,
20.
I'm good for that too.
So if Craig comes in, or if anybody else wants to come in for that, that's good to go. Yeah. No, I mean, I can say that this has just been. It's something that I did say to my kids. I just said, you're going to live through something that my parents didn't live through, and a lot of people in this last century didn't have to live through. And so because the last thing was like 1918. So our grandparents lived through it. My grandparents lived through it.
Yeah, I've had that conversation with my daughter as well. Like you're experiencing something right now that will eventually be part of like history that people will talk about, and you're gonna say to your kids one day, like, I remember that.
Yeah. No, it's been pretty. It's been terrible on especially people. There's a big kind of a wealth divide here too, because if you're in certain kinds of jobs, you can work from home. But if you're the kind of person who's in hospitality, or you're working in the restaurants and or the hotels, those kind of businesses, they've taken a massive cut. Mm-hmm. And so I can see where mental health has gone terrible.
Yeah, definitely. I think maybe part of the reason why we're doing okay right now. Like my husband and I, we own an automotive shop, so he has continued to work. They're just with a lot of adjustments, and like there were a few times where in the beginning we did cut back our hours of our shop by quite a lot. But I think we're one of those businesses that has like strangely been quite busy through the pandemic, like along with home hardwares or home, that's Canadian store, along with home renovation places, because people are stuck at home. So for us, people are stuck at home and they're finally getting their tires changed and whatever.
Yeah. Well, you have a lot more extra money too. If you used to go out a lot, we used to go out every week to dinner. We barely ever, like once in a blue moon here now. And so yeah, that's the other thing. I also noticed, Kafai is here. And I'll have to see if I'm pronouncing that right. But I just wanted to say, I agree with you with the home renovations. I've also noticed the gym equipment, like people, because they can't go to the gym, they're buying gym equipment, and I can't get a bike for anything. I tried to buy a second bike because I wanted to leave one in this other place we visit a lot. And they're like, we're a year out.
Yeah.
So how do you say your name? Kafei?
I'm Cafe. Either's fine. It's from a video game, and the pronunciation is, I don't even know it. So
unknown.
It's okay.
Okay, well, welcome here. Do you want to?
My real name is Jimmy. If you prefer to call me that. Okay.
So well, welcome. I don't know you. You want to share a little bit about yourself so everybody can learn?
Sure. I mean, I've been on the chat a few times on the stream, and I've just never had a chance to chime in one of these. I've been wanting to. It just happens to be when I'm at work all the time. But today I'm off, and I finally had an opportunity. And you always bring up, topics that I'm very interested in, like, for instance, spiritual experiences or psychedelics. I don't know if you're familiar with Elmo's World podcast, but he just did an interview with me like a couple of days ago, and we got into these topics. And one thing I wanted to ask Erin was, because she said she tried psilocybin, and I wanted to ask if she's familiar with.
I live in BC.
Terrence McKenna, what he called the heroic dose.
Yeah.
And did you ever try a dose range to that extent?
No. I think so I think his heroic dose is like 5 or something like that, or 5 to 7 or something ridiculous. No. I've never done anything quite like that. It's kind of on a bucket list. So it's like traveling to, the Amazon and doing ayahuasca. It's like bucket list stuff for me, but hasn't quite worked into my schedule right now.
Yeah, no, it's on my bucket list too. I haven't done that one, but I've called into like the atheist experience, Truth Wanted, Talk Heathen. You know, I've spoken to many of the hosts of the of all these ACA shows, and you know, Matt Dillahunty, a lot of the more popular ones.
Yeah.
And I've asked them if they've had, you know, psychedelics, and I think Eric told me that he's had tried some, and Matt said he's tried some too. But they both admitted that they've never tried, you know, something like Terence McKenna's heroic dose.
Yeah, and it's a shame too.
Yeah.
Did you ever read about that or listen to Sam Harris's experience when he did the heroic dose?
Yeah, he just recently did it. Yeah,
yeah, that was fascinating.
Yeah, he said that, you know, if he was religious, he would have said it was a direct vision of the Holy Spirit. Like there was no other words.
Yeah,
and yeah, I thought that was interesting. In the research, that's also what they're talking about too. When they dose these volunteers, they're talking about it's a psilocybin inside a pill. They're not necessarily making people eat mushrooms. You know, it take a long time to get down 5 dread grams, but they put the equivalent in a single pill of psilocybin, and so that's what they're giving the volunteers, and that's where they find these conversion experiences for atheists, where they no longer identify, you know, with atheism after the experience. And you know, they define they kind of characterize this experience in the research as a mystical experience, is the term they use after William James' work. And so, you know, they're building on research that has been going on throughout decades towards mystical experience, whether it's induced by psychedelics. There have been studies in the 60s, and, you know, or
fasting and meditation,
or meditation
and sensory deprivation. There's all these other techniques that they're looking into as well to produce the same kind of noetic experiences. And or I can't remember that same person you mentioned, like the breakdown of how they're categorized, the different mystical experiences. It's very interesting.
Yes, that is something I haven't really looked into at all.
The other really fascinating part that kind of like with the conversion of an atheist was do you watch Darren Brown at all?
The name sounds familiar, but maybe you could refresh my memory.
He's a mentalist. He's from the UK. He's actually a really great like motivational kind of speaker and philosopher as well. I love his work, but he has a show where he obviously does mentalist stuff, and he has an episode in particular where he gives an atheist a spiritual experience, and he walks through the whole thing and the whole psychological breakdown throughout the whole thing, and that's, I think, a great episode.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, Cafe, are you a Christian, or are you an atheist, or where do you classify yourself?
I actually got around to, you know, trying Terence McKenna's heroic dose myself back when I was like 23 years old. And, you know, I didn't think it would launch me into studying comparative religion and, you know, learning more about these experiences. But I eventually arrived at the perennial philosophy. You know, even in the research, they define these experiences in accordance with the perennial philosophies. So that, you know, they're referred to it as the complete mystical experience, because they do occur on a spectrum. And I guess the lower end of the spectrum, these experiences can be very unique, and they could, like, if you're a Christian, you may see Christ on the cross, or if you're a Hindu, you may see Shiva. If you're an atheist, you might see someone from Star Trek or something. You know, they're unique to the individual. In my own experience, I wasn't necessarily religious, and I saw Bill Hicks, the comedian.
Oh, that's funny.
And you know, they call these experiences inside the research when you still have this kind of subject-object relationship to, like, if you're your mind's eye is viewing things and relating to something, you know, you're still within this subject-object dichotomy. And they refer to them as visionary or archetypal experiences, and they can be very rich in detail. Carl Jung called them the furniture of the collective unconscious. That, you know, people sometimes report very, you know, Aztec imagery, or they could be very alien-like and so forth. You mentioned machine elves earlier.
Yeah.
But, you know, there is.
I haven't met the machine elves.
Neither have I, and I've taken, you know, high doses.
But I'd like to.
Wow.
I don't know.
We're freaking SJ out.
No, so it's funny. I want to say Craig is in here, so I want to just make sure he gets a chance to say hi. So, Craig, can you? He came back. He's trying to get his phone to work.
Yeah, I've got to speak to Craig once he was on Truth Wanted with Objectively Dan, and I called into that episode, and I got
Did
to
you
speak
really?
to him. Yeah.
Oh wow, because I did see that episode. I must have. Yeah, I'll have to go back and watch that again.
Yeah, we had an interesting conversation. I mean, it went off along with more with him instead of Objectively Dan. He kind of just sat there and listened to us.
Objectively, Dan tweeted back at me when I put a tweet out that said, who should I have on my channel? And he said, me. So I said, yeah, you can come on my channel. It's like,
oh, cool.
He's super nice.
He seems like he's nice.
He's a great guy.
He was converted by Anthony Magnabosco, the street epistemologist. He's from San Antonio. That's where I'm from, and I've been trying to run into him.
He's from Waco. Are you from Waco?
No, San Antonio, Texas.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know if he's in Waco now, but I know he's from.
I think he grew up in Waco.
Oh, okay. Well, I think he's. I don't know if he's. I know he's. I think when he was doing the shows, he was doing it in San Antonio, and I would go down to the colleges hoping to run into him, but I never got the chance. Yeah, he's always hiding from me, but I don't know. I did. I wanted Craig to chime in, but I don't know if he's having issues with this connection. Maybe for Christmas, y'all mentioned he should get Google Fiber, so I think maybe that's in store for him. But
yeah, or a computer, like a
maybe we should do like laptop. A GoFundMe.
Yeah, Craig, we might have to do a GoFundMe. Get you a computer.
But I did want to say that I think the machine elves are kind of like that was my first reason of wanting to take psychedelics when I was young, like when I was 19, and I heard Terrence first talk about these wild visions. I was curious about that. That's all I was concerned with at the time. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. When the experience actually happened, you would have been laughing your ass off if you saw me in real life. I was on the floor begging for my life. I thought I was going to die. And at the height of the experience, beyond what the researchers call archetypal or visionary experiences, there is no longer a subject-object dichotomy. They refer to this in Eastern philosophy as non-dualism or ego death. Yes.
That would totally flip me out. I would not, there's no way I would ever do that stuff. There's no way. I don't know how you guys, I don't know. Gosh, I would just, the loss of control would.
Yeah, complete loss of control.
Why would you want that?
Well, I don't think these experiences are necessarily done for fun. I think most people who take recreational doses, of course, they're going to take a low dose because they want to go to the concert. They want to be able to go to the party and still walk around and speak. And at the heights of these higher doses, you're not going to be able to do anything. You're immobilized. You're going to be laying on the ground. Even in the studies, I mean, they're pretty much the volunteers on the couch the entire time. You can't get up. You can try. it's not going to help you.
I feel. Oh, sorry.
I just want to say really quick. I had friends when I was in college, and I'll never forget this. We were all at this party, and some of my friends were just laughing like crazy, and some were on acid and some were on mushrooms, and they had this like bag tied to the ceiling, and they were in the garage, and it was like a plastic bag, and they lit it on fire, and they would watch like these little globules of plastic drop to the ground, and they were just roaring with laughter, like that was the funniest thing they ever saw. And I thought to myself, that's just messed up, man. It's like, how is that so funny? It's like just so crazy.
I don't know if you said you guys didn't really look into the research. I've been following it for like over a decade now. And, they've gotten to a point where they've refined James' mystical experience, the way he characterized it and defined it. They've refined his definition to a point where they've got 6 characteristics that they use to describe the experience. And, I could list some. I even called into the atheist experience with Matt Dillahunty, and he allowed me to list all 6. And after he hung up on me, of course.
Yeah.
How did he hang up on you?
He'll say something like, "Put the joint down, bro," and then he'll hang up on people.
Yeah, I mean, I was mentioning this research. I thought it might be legitimate, but and unfortunately, it went over his head, and at the time, and he admitted before the call began that he wasn't familiar with the research, too familiar, and he said he would look more into it, into the research. But he did, after he hung up on me, he did go through with Phil Session, and he went through the 6 characteristics, and he was asking Phil, well, do you identify with any of these? And they couldn't identify with a single one. And I think that just goes to show that, they've never had a type of experience like that. And, some of these characteristics are really profound. I mean, of course, one of them is unity is one of the core features. It's the interconnectedness of all people and things. All is one. Pure consciousness is how they describe it in these, in the peer-reviewed material. And another one is transcendence of time and space. There's a impression in your consciousness that all time, past and future, has collapsed, and like everything has already been done. There's nothing to do. It's also permeated with infinite and unconditional love, for all people and things. And so what I think what they're saying with the perennial philosophy is that these high mystical visions in each of the major religions, what in Christianity is referred to as the beatific vision or theoria, or the direct revelation of the Holy Spirit, is one and the same with what a Buddhist might call nirvana, or what a Hindu might call samadhi. That they're essentially speaking of one and the same thing. They've done it through epochs throughout history in different times and different places. Like Christianity is said to be 2,000 years old. And if you believe in evolution, I don't know if any of you guys do, but if you consider Hinduism, it's a religion that has roots dating back 10,000 BC. And so, it's, so what they're kind of saying, I don't know if you ever heard Aldous Huxley when he would talk about the mind at large.
I've read his book on perennialism.
Have you read The Doors of Perception?
No, is that pretty good?
It was one of the first books he wrote after having this experience when he was dosed with, I think it was mescaline, and he had finding an experience with that. And I think that was one of the first books he wrote. I think he did the perennial philosophy prior to his psychedelic experience, but he spoke about this idea called the mind at large. And in other words, that your brain right now is filtering reality. And when you take something like a high dose of a psychedelic, it's removing these filters, and you're actually getting a higher bandwidth of reality. And so all these volunteers who say that who they meet criteria for the so-called complete mystical experience, they will invariably say that the experience to them was more real than ordinary consciousness. It was the most real experience they've had, bar none, so forth. And that's expressed by every single one that meets criteria for the complete mystical experience.
No, I believe that. I gotta say though, we're getting kind of close to the end where I gotta wrap up because my kids got back from school, and one of them I've got to make sure he's doing his homework. So,
sure.
I'm on board with their Kef or Jimmy.
Yeah, no, I mean, I this is interesting stuff that I know very little about. So, and I can say that, I actually just think it's a little dangerous to toy around with psychedelics, drugs, and those kind of things, because if you're out of control, I mean, that just puts you in a position.
A harm reduction type scenario there. There's lots more to it than that. Yeah.
No, definitely, SJ, Steph. I would definitely emphasize that too, since you're going to end it soon. There is risk involved, of course, and even the professionals emphasize this. They say about 30% of the volunteers have the most hellish experience of their life. Their brain creates a literal hell in their mind. Yes, I mean, it can be psychologically scarring. Some of the volunteers from the post-study, I think that started in 2000, are still to this day seeking psychiatric help from those experiences.
So that's actually, let me ask that, Cafe, because that's important. So let me just have you expound on that. So you're saying, and I want to make sure I get what you're saying right. So you're saying there are long-term effects. So you do something in 2010, there's a chance that today you're still sort of paying the price for it?
Yes, and there's also long-term benefits as well. Like they all have 30% of these volunteers that unfortunately, are affected negatively. But I believe the reason why this research continues is because the benefits outweigh the negative effects. People that for instance, in the cancer studies that are, approaching death, they can't function because their death is so weighted on their mind. They can't even have dinner with their family. And when they go into this study and have this experience, they completely lose their fear of death and get to spend the last days of their lives in content. And, they're able to have that family dinner and so forth.
I think if you're in a condition like that, that's a clinical condition where you have a doctor administering the stuff, I think that seems reasonable if that's exactly what's going on. A person who's terminally ill like that. So.
Yes, so they're finding, that not just that, they have studies running right now. And if I was going to plug anything, I would plug that. It's Johns Hopkins. They're running studies on psilocybin and smoking cessation, depression, Alzheimer's disease, anorexia. They believe that, they're having such efficacy with all these things that they're getting permission to push all these studies, and they're happening right now. You can go to hopkinspsychedelic.org/index, and you can find, you can actually volunteer for any one of these studies. If you feel you're depressed, you think this might help you, you can call them. They're going to screen you, of course, but if you pass the screening test, then you can sign up.
No, it's really fascinating, the stuff that's coming out about it now. And it's like, we've kind of, I fully believe that like these psychedelics and all of these different other things were used in our culture for thousands of years. It's only been a very recent thing that we have cut them off completely. So it's
it's unfortunate, but I think there's a lot of interesting research at the same time. I don't know if you saw this guy that was on Joe Rogan's podcast recently, Brian Murarescu.
Brian Mir, the Immortality Key. I read his book. It's really fascinating.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, listen, you guys, can we go around and everybody say where we can find you and or what you're working on? Because somebody in the chat actually asked Cafe if you're on Twitter. I did see that. So if you guys, maybe we'll start with Erin because she was first, and then Cafe, then Craig. If Craig can do that.
I'm on Twitter under the same handle there, XChristianErin, but it's spelled EXXTIANERIN. And you can look up the same handle on YouTube and you'll find other conversations I've had. But I currently do not have a channel yet.
Yeah, you got to get one.
I know.
So you'll definitely get some people over there because you've had a lot of people and you've been on a lot of channels, so you're generating interest.
It's so fun being on other people's channels, and I'm so bad at technology. So
try. You know what? Go to StreamYard. It's super easy to set up. Like I can't believe how easy it is.
Okay, I'll maybe ask you to help me with that.
We lost Craig. It's way easier than Zoom even. Like Zoom actually had some steps that were kind of confusing, but StreamYard you push like 2 buttons and you're up.
Okay.
So it's awesome. So Cafe, how can people find you?
I have a YouTube channel. I haven't been adding too much to it lately, but I plan to. Especially if I can get some subscribers, I'll definitely add some more content. But I have some of my calls that I did into the Atheist Experience clipped there that I've mirrored. And other things, I've got invited to other atheist channels outside of the ACA. But it's the same. I have it as Cafe, the same name and the same image that you see of Majora's Mask. It's the same one I use for the channel. So if that'll help you find it.
Okay. Cool. So what is the image there? It's Majora's Mask? Is that what you said?
Yeah, it's from The Legend of Zelda. It's a video game. I just thought it looked kind of psychedelic. He's looking at it. Almost like if the mask gives you DMT vision or something, but of course, and like I was mentioning, like in an actual experience, you wouldn't be able to look down at your hand or even your body because that's completely gone. It's a transformation of consciousness in a very similar way that a caterpillar transforms to a butterfly. It's very different. There's it's very hard to speak on the nature of non-dualism. You almost have to experience it for yourself to really grasp it.
Okay, so that's fair enough. So and I know we have differing opinions here in the audience between that and my opinion on that, and some of the audience has different opinions. Some of them sound like they really like what you're saying, so so people are going to want to hear more, Cafe. So definitely, and same thing with XChristianErin. So people want to definitely hear more. So I hope that you guys will come back. And Craig, I hope that next time when you come on, you'll be able to get in here. I might have to do a Zoom video next time I do this so that Craig can definitely get on because he has easier time with Zoom, I guess. And so I also want to say thanks to Digital Gnosis who came in earlier today. So we had a good group of people. So you guys, I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast. Please go ahead and find Cafe's channel and find these guys on. Did you say Cafe? I forgot if you said you're on Twitter.
I do have a Twitter account, and I've only used it to message Craig, and that's it.
Is it under Cafe?
I forgot what I have. It might be. I pretty much use the name for everything, but I do want to start a channel called The Cat Down the Road soon, and it's based off Ralph Smart always speaking of the cat down the road. I'm gonna be the cat down the road, so I don't know.
Cool.
I might start that soon.
There you go. Awesome. Well, great. Well, you guys, thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast Friday. You guys make sure you come, because I actually have the pastor, Braxton Hunter's pastor of this he's a lead pastor of this major church, who's going to come and talk to me at 1:00. And we're going to talk about the evidence we have for Jesus' resurrection. And so
I think I might. Oh, okay. Yeah.
You know him?
Okay. Oh yeah. Yeah. We'll see. I'll see if I can do that.
Okay, good. Yeah, come on in. And so again, 1:00, come back. And then I'm going to try to run this again. Oh, next Wednesday, I'm going to have house guests. So I won't be able to do this next Wednesday, but we'll probably do it the Wednesday following next Wednesday. So you guys have a very merry holiday. If I don't see you again, whatever you worship or whatever you believe, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy New Year. What did I miss?
Thanks for having us.
All right. Thank you.